Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the opening session of this new edition of the Coal Regions Virtual Week. It's really a pleasure to see so many of you connected today. I hope you are in good health and that you are coping as much as it is possible under the current circumstances. How much we would have liked to have this gathering with a physical presence. It's not possible, and we're making the best out of it. I use the opportunity to introduce myself. My name is Paula Pinho, and I'm the new director responsible for the directorate in DG Energy, directorate responsible for just transition, consumers, energy efficiency, and innovation. And it's really important to see how also in the organization of the institution, just transition is at the core of our work. And it's really for me a big pleasure to have this important mission that I will carry out together with you. Now, before we go into business, let me just set out some practical aspects. We have foreseen interpretation in 5 languages: English, Polish, Spanish, Hungarian, and Slovenian. If you want to listen to the interpretation, please download the application called Interactio and enter the code CRIT1. You can see this on the screen. And from there, you select the language channel that you need. We will have, at the end of the session with the panelists, we'll have a question and answer session, which will then be moderated not by me, but by Adela Tesarova, who is the new head of unit responsible for consumers, local initiatives, and just transition. We will be gathering your questions on Slido. For those who do not know Slido, again, it's set out on the screen. You can go to this website and enter the code, again, CRIT1, as you see. And in a moment, I will then give you a general update of what are the recent developments related to coal regions and in general to energy in the EU. But before I do so, I'm very happy and honored to introduce our keynote speaker, who actually does not really need any introduction. He is the father of this initiative and really one of the masterminds behind the Just Transition Fund. He represents the EU largest coal region, Silesia, in the European Parliament, and he is a firm believer in a better future that lies ahead thanks to a green energy transition. He has been a tireless and effective advocate of European coal regions and communities, and it's therefore a pleasure to welcome you, Mr. Jerzy Buzek, member of the European Parliament. Thank you for being with us. The floor is yours.
Thank you very much. Good morning, everybody. My goodness, madam, such a polite, fantastic introduction and presenting me from such a side. Well, thank you very, very much. I congratulate you your new role, being so much involved in coal regions in transition. So let me say at the beginning of our meeting, our conference, a few words, maybe some history, also perspective for the future. Last week was marked by at least 2 major events which should shape the future not only in the EU but also globally. First, last Wednesday, the EU reached a compromise on the European climate law, making legal obligations of the goals proposed in the Green Deal, 55% by 2030, and climate neutral EU by mid-century. Second, last Thursday at the virtual summit on climate change, President Joe Biden announced that the US economy would reduce CO2 emissions more than 50% by 2030 compared to 2005 levels, and Australia and Canada, Canada and Japan are on the same way. And some other countries, of course, Chinese, 2006 neutrality. Reaching these ambitious and important climate goals will require hard work, together with major changes in our economy and our lifestyles, which is very important. From my personal perspective and experience, I know that deep structural transformation do not happen overnight. You need commitment, time, and financial resources to make sure that no one is left behind, which is very important, especially in our European Union. To prepare for such a just and inclusive transition, already back in 2017, when our climate goals were more modest and no resources were dedicated in the EU budget to support energy transition in the EU core regions. We launched, together with Vice President of the European Commission, Maroš Šefčovič, the Core Regions in Transition platform. Nowadays, when a new 55% cut goal is almost around the corner in 9 years, I sincerely hope that the work started by the platform already in 2018 not only equipped the EU core regions with strategies and ideas to succeed in this transition, but also prepared them, it means you, core regions in transition, to fully benefit from the resources available through the newly created Just Transition Fund, which I initially proposed in the European Parliament in my Committee of Industry, Research and Energy. Sorry. Okay. Indeed, over the last 3 years, the EU went a long way, both in the climate ambitions from 40% to 55% in 2030, and in the financial resources allocated in the EU budget to just transition, from 2 million euro financing the platform as a preparatory action proposed by the European Parliament, and €0 in other EU budget lines in 2018, to a, today, separate, dedicated budget line for the Just Transition Fund and 17 billion euro in the new MFF. From my perspective of each rapporteur on JTF, the 17.5 billion is of course not enough, even together with all the Just Transition mechanism from InvestEU, from European Investment Bank. But it is definitely better than €0 we had back in 2018 and a good start for the next MFFs after 2027. That's my first important message. As said earlier, energy transition is a long and expensive process which should be supported by the EU at least for the next 3 decades. So it is also very important that this new dedicated Just Transition budget line is properly financed in the next 3 or 4 financial perspectives. Second and third message is on the planning of the JTF in the current 7-year budget. Well, message number 2, crucial role of the regions in preparation of territorial just transition plans. To make the transition a success, the voices of the regions, the final beneficiaries, your voices must be heard and taken into account. Transparent communication, open dialogue, everything is important. But inclusive approach is the key. You should have something like ownership of the territorial just transition plans. I would like to encourage all of you, the regions present in this virtual event, to contribute to preparation of the plans and member states to allow for such an approach. And message, let me say number 3, energy transition should remain at the focus of our efforts and must be included in the territorial just transition plans. I am for just transition initiatives of socio-economic nature, like reskilling, upskilling, social projects, but they should be supported together with and not instead of energy transition projects. It means concrete physical projects, creating new attractive jobs in any core region. Last but not least, going to the end of my speech, our success is in just transition is very important for the EU core regions and their citizens, but its transformative impact can and should go far beyond EU borders. The EU has a lot to offer in terms of knowledge and experience in just transition to the rest of the world. This is why in 2019, as amendment to the preparatory action, I proposed to extend the geographical scope of the initiative for core regions in transition to Western Balkans and Ukraine. I trust that this initiative will help the energy transition of our neighbors and become an excellent example of the EU energy and climate diplomacy in action. Thank you very much. All the best for next hours of our discussion. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Buzek. It is really a pleasure. And as said, a privilege, because you said it, deep structural changes do not happen overnight. And you are a clear example of somebody who has committed to the cause of just transition, of the core regions in transition. And we really have a lot to thank you for being here today. And it's such a pleasure to see how this has evolved and how you really launched the seeds for these actions, which are now really giving fruit. So thank you very much for being with us, and we'll see you still later. Now, as indicated earlier, we would like to give you a short update of recent developments. MEP Buzek already mentioned some of them. And I will take up some more in some detail. In fact, last year, 2020, the idea was really to set the long-term strategy. The Commission had presented the climate target plan, which defined the European Green Deal's climate vision for 2030. And for 2050 in view of a climate neutral European Union. For 2030, the Commission had proposed a more ambitious climate target, going from minus 40% to minus 55% of greenhouse gas emissions. And it is indeed with big pleasure that, as announced by Mr. Buzek, we have come also thanks to the decisive contribution of the European Parliament together with member states. It has now been agreed last week on this minus 55% target for 2030. Now, last year, the European Commission has also presented a number of other important initiatives which were meant to accelerate the transition in a number of key sectors, from the renovation of buildings, what we called the renovation wave, from a strategy on hydrogen and aiming at green hydrogen, and a strategy on offshore renewable energy to really seize the potentials which are still unseized. We also presented a strategy for system integration, for the energy system integration, which is aimed at reaping the benefits for decarbonization and increasing the synergies between all economic sectors, in particular the power sector, buildings, transport and industry, because these are sectors where really there is still a huge potential for further decarbonization. Now, 2021 will be the year to implement this strategic vision. In a few months, in June, we will launch the first building blocks of a new legislative package that we call Fit for 55. It will translate the new 2030 climate objective, the minus 55 greenhouse gas emissions objective, as foreseen now in the climate law, into sectoral legislation. And the idea is to see how can the different sectors contribute to making this target possible. It will therefore include revisions of the Renewable Energy Directive, of the Energy Efficiency Directive, as well as various pieces of the relevant climate legislation from the emissions trading system, the effort sharing regulation, and a few others. Now, our current work is, of course, very much focused on the recovery effort. We did not know when President von der Leyen presented her vision for a Green Deal, we did not know that we would be facing such challenges brought by COVID. Now, with also the financial means in place, endorsed by the Council, by the Parliament, we are helping member states designing ambitious recovery and resilience plans, which should create jobs, durable jobs, and which would advance both on the green and the digital transition. And I know well how intense the debates have been in the member states on how the money, these funds from the recovery funds should be best spent. The Commission has given some guidelines, some clear guidelines, indicating that the recovery needs to be green and digital, so that really we can be in a better position than we were before this pandemic. Now we are getting ready to start assessing the plans. Last week we received the first recovery plan from Portugal, and the next step for the Commission is to assess the plans which should be coming in from all the member states. And we're really encouraging all member states to take this opportunity to the full of this unprecedented amount of EU support to really build back in a better way, to build more resilient economies, which means investing massively in clean energy transition and ensuring that it is fair. Now, at the same time, the Just Transition Fund, which preceded this recovery fund, is also ongoing. You heard an update yesterday, so I will not go further into that. Just to say that we are looking very closely at ensuring the complementarity between the recovery and the resilience facility and the Just Transition Fund support. These are really intended to work together and to be complementary so that we can accelerate the clean energy transition while at the same time addressing the socio-economic consequences on the most affected areas and communities. And we really are hopeful and confident that the EU countries will seize the opportunities of the synergies of these two instruments. Now, I'd also like to give you a short update on the progress achieved under our EU initiative for coal regions in transition, and of which you are part of. Next Thursday, colleagues in the Secretariat will give you more details about the progress made and our START program. A new toolkit on technology options for repurposing coal infrastructure has been launched this month, and a new one on funding is currently being prepared. We also launched, as MEP Buzek mentioned, our initiative for coal regions in Western Balkans and in Ukraine last December, and the secretariat of this initiative in March. Now, if you have an interest in being involved in a bilateral exchange and cooperation with your counterparts in the Western Balkans, or Ukraine, you can get in touch with the secretariat of this new initiative, and you will find the contact address here on the screen. We really encourage you to do so, as you will find that the cooperation and experience sharing is extremely useful, if not really essential, especially when coal regions cross borders, including EU borders, share so many of the underlying socio-economic challenges. We are about to also launch our exchange program, which is aimed at allowing you to visit each other across the EU and start working on joint projects, on joint ideas, and really on sharing best practice. The idea is really to multiply the good ideas that are there on the field. And finally, we are concluding the work on a new technical assistance facility that will help the coal regions design clean energy and energy efficiency projects. We will give you more details soon, but the idea is really to have this powerful tool to support the energy transition in coal, peat, and oil shale regions. Finally, just a brief comment on the fact that progress is not just happening here in Brussels, but really is happening across the EU. Some EU countries have recently announced that they will become coal-free, including the country I know best, Portugal, which will close its last coal-fired power plant by the end of the year. Spain is making impressive progress. Hungary has new announcements to make, and Slovenia is also about to adopt a phase-out and strategy. And Poland published a new energy strategy this winter, looking at 2040. We'll go into this now with our panelists, who will give you further details on these various progress. And we will also have a representative from a region, a coal region, a region in Poland, Wielkopolska, who will give us and share with us the example from the ground and what is happening there. We are really showing the way, and the world has noticed there is a growing interest for our initiatives in the US, in Asia, in South Africa. So really, it is encouraging. Let's keep up the good work. But before I give the floor to our representatives from the countries and from the region, I would like to invite Felicia Aminoff, who is an energy transition analyst for Bloomberg New Energy Finance, to give us a presentation on a model that prices and technology costs to design the energy transition scenarios for EU countries. So, Felicia, thank you for joining us, and the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. Can everyone see my slides?
Yes.
Great, thanks. Okay. Yes, so my name is Felicia Aminoff, and I'm an energy transitions analyst at Bloomberg NEF. So I'll start by shortly introducing Bloomberg NEF, or BNEF for short. We're a primary research provider, and we deliver insights that help navigate the transition to a cleaner future. Historically, we've had a strong focus on clean power markets, but today we cover a wide variety of sectors. So short about my presentation today. I will start by giving you a little status update on European coal phase-outs. Then I will talk about the key energy transition drivers, of which, of course, EU policy, which has been mentioned before, is a big one. Then I will briefly present some results from Bloomberg NEF's energy systems modeling. So our European energy transition outlook, our 2030 scenarios for coal regions, as well as some insights on Spain's coal phase-out. So to the status of European coal phase-outs. Many countries in the EU have already set dates for coal phase-outs. In fact, 13 countries have already recently phased out coal or plan to do so before 2030, with Germany being a late follower with its 2038 coal phase-out. Then we have a few countries where the date for coal phase-out is still under discussion, such as Spain and the Czech Republic. But in a few countries, for example, Poland, there is not yet any coal phase-out date. And looking at the amount of coal plants closed per year over the past few years, and then also the expected closures for the next 5 years. So 2020 set a record for coal plant closures in Europe. Much of the closures were in the United Kingdom, as well as in Spain. And even if Spain does not have a legislated coal phase-out date yet, we actually expect that Spain's coal plants will all close by the end of 2023. Then looking at 2021, we expect that even more coal plants will close than in 2020, with most of this coming from Germany, that has recently held tenders for coal plant closures. Then looking up until 2025, we see Italy's coal phase-out date approaching, and probably many of the coal plants will actually close a couple years before that 2025 deadline. So looking briefly at the energy transition drivers. So the talks before, of course, mentioned the EU Green Deal and the new, more ambitious 2030 target of 55% emissions reduction. And we can expect that most of the impact of this new target will be actually felt in the electricity sector, where the renewables generation would need to more than double in the next 10 years to reach this target. The EU carbon price is, of course, a big driver of the energy transition in the electricity sector. And Bloomberg NEF's carbon price forecast predicts that the price will actually go over 100 euros in 2030. This is mainly driven by the new, more ambitious 2030 target. And as you can see in comparison to our 2020 carbon price outlook, the latest outlook is even higher. So previously we expected the price to reach about 80 euros in 2030. So rising carbon prices, of course, put pressure on coal plants. And we can already see this trend. So the light gray lines represent years 2016 to 18. And we can see that the share of coal generation in the European electricity mix used to be higher a few years ago and has clearly dipped after 2019. Coal plants can temporarily generate more, pressured by, for example, cold winters and rising gas prices. But overall, there's already a clear downwards trend, and a big driver of this is the carbon price. Another big driver of the energy transition is, of course, the price of renewables. So this is the global levelized cost of electricity for different generation technologies. And the price of solar power has actually dropped by almost 90% over the past decade. And we've now reached a tipping point where both onshore wind and solar are actually cheaper than coal and gas plants when compared on a levelized cost of electricity basis. And even when we compare the cost of newly built solar and wind plants with the cost of running an existing coal plant, we can see that wind and solar are now cheaper. As for gas plants, we expect that the running hours of gas plants will decrease as renewables generation increases, which explains why on a levelized cost of electricity basis, so per megawatt of electricity produced, the cost of gas plants goes up. So then on to looking to our modeling of the European electricity generation until 2050, using our least cost modeling approach and taking into account the ambitious European climate targets and policy. So overall, we expect electricity generation to increase as more sectors are electrified, for example, transport. And we can see here that coal completely disappears from the European electricity mix after 2038. This coal generation is not all replaced by gas in our scenario. And instead, we expect some new technology to fill part of the gap left by closing coal and gas plants. We currently call this technology X because this could be a new technology which is still up and coming, for example, hydrogen, but it could also be a mix of batteries and increased interconnection in a European context. Then zooming in on 4 coal-heavy countries which currently don't have a coal phase-out date: Poland, Czechia, Bulgaria, and Romania. So comparing the 2030 energy mix with the 2019 energy mix for these 4 countries, we can see that coal completely disappears from the energy mix in Czechia, Romania, and Bulgaria. And this is mainly driven by the carbon price. In Poland, about 2/3 of coal capacity close in these scenarios. But these scenarios are modeled with our previous carbon price outlook. And with the new carbon price outlook with even higher prices, we could expect that coal plants would come under even more distress than outlined in these scenarios. And as we can see in all countries, most of the closing coal plants is replaced by renewables generation, and there's only a small increase in gas capacity. And zooming in on Poland, we can see that with our least cost modeling, actually most coal plants would close already in the next 5 years. This would temporarily be replaced by an uptick in gas generation, but in the long run, as renewables generation increases, gas generation would decline again. Then looking at Spain's coal phase out, where coal to gas fuel switching and a growing role of renewables has brought talks of a coal phase out a lot earlier than we would have expected a couple years ago. So as we can see here with a black line, coal generation in Spain used to consistently represent over 50% of produced electricity. But then in 2019, there was a sharp drop in coal generation. This was instead replaced with gas generation, and the driving factors behind this was a favorable gas price as well as rising carbon prices. Also, Spain had spare gas capacity, which enabled this quick switch. But because of this quick switch, there's now talk of a much earlier coal phase out in Spain than we would have expected prior to 2019. Then looking at our modeling of the Spanish electricity mix until 2050, we can see that with our least cost approach, coal is phased out very fast, but not all of this is replaced by gas, as renewables can take an increasing role. And a last note on the role of gas in replacing coal plants. So with increasing renewables generation, the economic rationale says that renewables, which have a zero marginal cost for generation, will dominate the electricity system. This means that whenever renewables such as solar and wind are producing, gas plants will probably not generate. So that's why we expect that in the future, the capacity factors of gas power plants will remain a lot lower than that of coal plants historically. And this is something that investors need to take into account when investing in new gas plants. So that was all for me, and I look forward to hearing from our panelists. Thank you.
Thank you, Felicia, very much for these very interesting insights into what are the economic trends that underpin the energy transition in Europe. I believe you will see this resonate with a lot of the discussions that we will now have with the representatives from the member states and the region. So let's move on to our panel of speakers. The idea this morning is really to hear about progress made by each of the countries and regions represented here. And we've chosen these particular ones because we believe they have interesting and new elements to bring to the discussion, where we, as I said in my introduction, we have noticed positive developments all across Europe in the past few months. So we'll hear a presentation from our four speakers, then have a question and answer. So feel free to ask questions to our speakers directly in Slido. Our first stop this morning will be with Slovenia, which in recent months has gone through an extensive process of consultations to find a date for a coal exit and options for the future energy system of the country and a regional development strategy for its coal regions. The process is now coming to an end, and to give us the latest details, I am very pleased to welcome Blaž Košorok, State Secretary in the Ministry of Infrastructure of Slovenia. Blaž, the floor is yours. Thank you for joining.
Thank you, Madam Director. You hear me? You can hear me?
Yes, very well.
Hopefully you can see my PowerPoint or not yet. Let me ask maybe for help your technical assistant. Wait a moment.
Very good. We're seeing it.
You are seeing it. Good. Thank you so much for the assistant. So, okay, yes. I heard today many, let's say, the same things that are now happening in the phase out in Slovenia, especially with, let's say, with the core carbon prices outlook. How is it affecting the economics? And probably it will be the same as everybody everywhere in the coal region. So these carbon prices will be the main drivers of the phase out of the coal. So can we switch to the next slide, please? Hello? Yes, thank you. So this is, let's say, a short or a brief timeline of our process, how it started in Slovenia. As you can see, in February, we requested to join these coal regions in transition, then went through May when setting a national working group with different stakeholders, then through to July when it was a kickoff meeting, and then spring last year where DG Reform hired for us a external expert and technical support, which was Deloitte, company Deloitte. We had a kickoff meeting in June last year with Deloitte for the preparation of now our national strategy for the coal phase out. Then in September we got the first. Then through March and April this year we started our official public consultation on strategy and of course of the environmental report, which shall be done according to our legislation. Let's say through the spring we will prepare all the drafts for the territorial plans and so on, and hope, let's say, for in the June this year that we will reach a political decision for the year when the phase out of coal will actually happen. So can we go to the next slide, please? So yes, to give you a little.
Apologies, Mr. Košorok. Could you please turn on your video?
Yes. Is it better? Can you see me now? It's better, huh?
Yes.
Yeah, okay. So to give you a short insight of Slovenia's two coal region, one is still existing one. It's Savinjsko-Šaleška region, is to the north of the country, to the border to Austria. And the second one is Zasavje, which is no longer in operation. So in Savinjska, there is, as you can see, more than 150 years of the mining tradition. A lot of employees directly attracted to the lignite mine is now more, or let's say around 2,000 employees. Our only existing thermal power plant is Korpa Thermal Šoštanj, which is now supplying more than 1/3 of, or 30% of Slovenia's electricity. So this is quite a questionable what to do, how to replace this electricity production, which is also gaining a lot of auxiliary services and so on. And also a lot of industry is connected to the use of coal. So additionally, as it is written, additionally 2,000 workforce is dependent on the income on the coal. So this is quite a, how should I say, a lot of to be done for restructuring this region, and a lot of talks and a lot of conferences are now going on regarding this question. So in the Zasavje region, also from the beginning of the 19th century, there is no more active coal mine, no more thermal power plant, which was also there. And since the closure, there more than 5,000 jobs were lost. Can we go to the next slide, please? So we decided to put our strategy on the 4 main pillars: on the energy, then on the environment, on the economy, and of course on the workforce, meaning human resources and social infrastructure. So as I said, thermal power plant Šoštanj delivers 1/3 of Slovenian power. So replacing that will be quite an issue in Slovenia, especially in regards of the year of the closure. So we are, let's say, pushing very hard to be that in year 33. But we'll see at the end, it will be a political decision. So can we go to the next slide, please? So yes, first of all, we will now send our strategy to the so-called approval of the environmental report. Meaning this strategic environmental procedure must be done according to our law. And as I said in the beginning, we are quite positive that our government will adopt by the end of June this year the strategy for the coal phase out. And of course, there will be just transition plans for both regions will be finalized. And 2 main regulatory issues must be done, meaning that 2 laws will be passed in the short future. So to call it a law on closure on the mine, and of course, which is, let's say, more important from our perspective, the economic and social restructuring, or let's say on the both work to come and to reach these goals. But as said at the beginning from Mr. Buzek, our main, let's say, main goal is that no one is left behind, especially in the economic restructuring. because as you saw, there are 2,000 plus working force to be replaced in the next 12 to 15 years, we see. So thank you from here, and I will be very happy to join you in the discussion which will follow.
Thank you very much, State Secretary, for this comprehensive update, and we really look forward to the final announcements with a great deal. But this really shows the progress that you've been doing in Slovenia, which is really very much appreciated, because we know how much efforts are behind.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you for being with us. We will now move on to Hungary, who has recently announced that the coal exit could possibly take place a few years ahead of schedule, in 2025 rather than in 2030. Now, to explain us where Hungary stands on this issue and what would be its possible consequences, I'm very pleased to introduce Barbara Botos, Deputy Secretary of State for Climate Policy in Hungary's Ministry of Innovation and Technology. Barbara, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Paula, and I'm really honored that I can talk again. I was here in 2018, and since 2018, I think this topic has evolved so much, so I have really happy news to announce to you. So I hope you can see my presentation and that I'm moving forward to the second slide. So lignite phase out, which is coal phase out in Hungary, is a really crucial part of the National Climate and Energy Plan, the NECP of Hungary. And yes, as you said, the official coal phase out of Hungary is 2030, and this is the date the government approved. Let me talk about a life integrated project that Hungary has just won, and in a similar way as Poland and Ireland and also Portugal was really successful in winning a life integrated project. This life integrated project is the catalyzer of coal phase out in Hungary. What do I mean by that? It has a lot of actions in it which really help facilitate this coal phase out in Hungary in an extremely structured way. As you might know, that there is one really big coal mining region in Hungary which is clearly defined, and that's why we think if we can do coal phase out by 2030 in Hungary in a very structured way, that it can be replicable. This whole structured way of doing this extremely important job towards climate neutrality would help other member states to follow our examples. These are the basic activities within the life integrated project that will support coal phase out in Hungary. I would just highlight a few of them. This is really focusing on building human capacity in the region, which is in line with the Just Transition Fund's philosophy of reskilling and upskilling. We are going to focus on prototypes for repurposing these places. We're doing a lot of engagement and awareness raising and preparation for large projects and pilot career change programs. And also this life integrated project is going to support the territory just transition plans of 2 counties where this whole lignite mine and the connected power plant is positioned. And also monitoring will be extremely important. And this is the rest. These are those financial resources, we call them the complementary financial resources that we would like to resort to carry out coal phase out in Hungary by 2030. METAR is the renewable support program. This is basically not an investment support, but an operational support, and it works as a market type mechanism. We would also like to use 10C derogation of the EU ETS directive, which we can resort to for replacing coal phase out, for replacing coal by natural gas, waste to energy, or solar PVs. 10D article of EU ETS directive is the modernization fund, which is basically all about the modernization of large energy infrastructure. This will be also a key element towards coal phase out in Hungary. And Just Transition Fund, where we would like to support career change, economic diversification. These are the two most important parts of the Just Transition Fund: reskilling, upskilling, and economic diversification. And of course, a lot of residential programs, decarbonization and repurposing, etc. And the last but not least, the multi-annual financial framework, which will also contribute to coal phase out in Hungary. If and only if all these financial resources can be mobilized, we could move to an earlier date. However, officially, coal phase out date in Hungary is 2030. I'm just saying it to Felicia. So what I would use rather is saying 2030 for Hungary and in brackets 25. But the precondition of moving to an earlier date is using all these financial resources for coal phase out in Hungary. However, I would like to emphasize again, that 2030 is the date of coal phase out in Hungary, which is approved by the government. There is no other date which is approved by the government, by the Hungarian government yet. Let's see. So what's the overall objective of this live integrated project and the Just Transition in Hungary? The overall goal is the wide implementation of Hungary's National Climate and Energy Plan. So the big bubble is the live integrated project that we won recently, and this will run for 9 years actually. And Just Transition Fund is the other huge resource that can contribute to coal phase out in Hungary. Let me just show in the two segments of the next slide what the EU LIFE program in Hungary means. As you can see, there is 60% co-finance. The project duration is 9 years, in line with the official coal phase out date of Hungary, which is 2030. And the expected results is that basically decarbonization, since the Matra power plant in Hungary is responsible for 14% of total domestic CO2 generation, and also 50% of total domestic CO2 emissions from power generation. Also, expected result is human capacity building and implementing the transition on central, regional, and local level, full implementation of industrial coal phase out. We would like to work on prototypes to substitute lignite fire technology and test flexibility solution as repurposing of mine sites, which is not recultivation. It's more repurposing than recultivation. Implementing career change and supply chain companies. There are more than 900 supply chain companies which are connected to the Matra power plant. And we would like to replicate, as I said, this clearly defined structured phase out in Eastern Europe's lignite region, if it's possible. I will show a slide on that. And as I said, we would like to use complementary funds to finance the NECP implementation, including through a coal phase out. And these complementary funds are extremely crucial to achieve our objective. And what is the other side of the slide? This is the SRSP, the Structural Reform Program that Hungary resorted to in a similar fashion to other member states. This is a technical assistance provided by the European Commission for the preparation of territory just transition plans. The winning company is helping Hungary to prepare the draft just transition plans of 3 counties, Heves, Borsod, Double-Zemplén counties, which cover the area of the Matra power plant, and Baranya counties, where are very heavy
We have lost Barbara. Our colleagues from the technical support team are doing their best.
Yes, it seems that Ms. Botos lost her connection, so we're trying to get her back.
Okay, let's give it a few moments. If we don't manage, then we proceed to Laura Martín, and we would come back to to Barbara later.
It seems that we have lost connection, so please go forward with Ms. Martín Murillo.
Very good. Well, it is a pity, and I do hope that we will manage to reconnect to Barbara, because her presentation was indeed very, very detailed and interesting. Now, we to close our tour of capitals, we are now coming to Spain, to Madrid. In recent years, Spain has been showing that you can combine an ambitious climate policy and at the same time put in place a strong concern for just transition and address this concern. An element of particular interest is the signature of a just transition agreement that brings together central and regional governments, utilities, trade unions, really in an inclusive approach, and provides a roadmap for the future of energy and of the Spanish coal regions. It is therefore with great pleasure that we have with us Laura Martín Murillo, who is the director of the newly created Just Transition Institute in Spain. Laura, we're very happy to have you with us. The floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Paula. Thank you very much, the Coal Regions in Transition platform, to invite Spain. And thank you very much for the curiosity you share about what is happening in Spain. I hope you can see my presentation. And can you see it? Yes. Okay. So I will try to, in this presentation, I would like to focus on one part of what we are doing in the Just Transition business in Spain. That is this agreement that you mentioned. As you said, I'm the director of the Institute for Just Transition in Spain, and it also, the creation of this institute somehow shows the governmental support in the Just Transition agenda. This agreement is part of a wider work that we have been presenting in other times. When we presented we presented a package that included our national energy and climate plan that had to be submitted to Europe, the draft bill on climate change, and just transition strategy, everything at the same time in 2019. The NECP, you know, that proposed to achieve emissions neutrality by 2050, and also proposed a reduction of emissions of almost 40 in the next decade. The draft bill on climate change that also incorporates these objectives it has just recently passed the Congress and is about to pass the Senate, so we will be happy finally to have this law approved in Spain. And then the Just Transition that from the very first beginning wanted to incorporate this ambition in the climate change agenda with the same ambition from the social part and with the very important aim of leaving no one behind. For the coal power plants, and as you may imagine, the Just Transition strategy and above all, the urgent plan incorporates both mines and coal power plants, but I will focus this presentation in the coal power plants. In 2018, Spain had 15 coal power plants, 10 gigawatts, and it produced 10% of our electricity. And regardless of the economic balance, it is true that these coal power plants are crucial for the activity of the surrounding territories. In 2018, and the reality has not changed very much, because they are at this process of closure is going through the different phases. It provides direct and subcontractor jobs for 3,000 people, 3,000 workers, and are also very important part of the induced impact along the value chain for income municipalities. So these coal power plants were very much important for the economic reality of these regions that you can see in the map. As it was explained before, we were under a context where these prospects for the plants were worsening since 2018. for different reasons: political, commitment with the climate change, with the Paris Agreement, environmental factors. Some operators decided not to do the investments in order to fulfill with new European Union environmental legislation, and above all, also market factors. The increased price of CO2, and as it was said before, in Spain we had overcapacity, so the coal power plants could exit the system, the electricity system, and we had enough backup capacity from other technologies. I will show you more or less what is happening. Here you have installed capacity, and in 2020 it was reduced by more than 50%, the installed capacity of coal capacity in Spain, and by 2020 almost 85% of the installed capacity will be shut down. The electricity generated, you see that both in 2019 and in 2020, the decrease has been sharply happened, and in total what we have now is that the generation fell by 9%. As I said, the closure of these coal power plants, it has to imply additional support to the most vulnerable during and after the closure of the power plants. And for that reason, the Ministry for Ecological Transition, together with the Ministry of Labour, launched this proposal for utility companies and workers that I'm going to present. This agreement for a just transition for the coal power plants want to focus, and we will see later that is not our only focus, want to focus on the labor side, on how to accompany the transition in the actual closure of the coal power plants. It started in April 2020, where we signed the first agreement with 3 operators on the side, Iberdrola and Naturgy, and that involved 12 plants, more than 2,000 workers, and almost 8 gigawatts. Very recently, in March, IRB joined the agreement, and as a result, we have now all the coal power plants covered by this agreement, and proposing a just and fair transition for the 15 plants. The parties that have signed this agreement are the union side, UGT and Comisiones, the industry workers, Naturgy, Endesa, and Iberdrola and EDP, as I have said, and the Ministry for Ecological Transition and the Ministry for Labour and Social Economy. What are our commitments of this agreement? Well, first, the companies have to submit a support plan for the closures, where they commit to maintain employment through relocation plans. They give employment priority or training to workers, not only of their own, but of their ancillary companies, of their subcontractors. And also what we propose the utility companies is, why don't you think of including new investment proposal in the same region? Why don't you diversify it, or you change also in the same regions? For the unions, they committed to monitor and ensure the compliance of this agreement, and particularly helping us with training, with occupational health and safety, and also to see what they can also be involved in how we build this reindustrialization in these plans. And for the General State Administration, from the government side, what we propose to accompany this labor side, we created a special register in the Institute for the Just Transition for affected workers to follow all these commitments on requalification and job support from the companies. But not only, we are also proposing specific new tools for with certification of this training from the government side, with specific measures for workers over 52, what is part of the most vulnerable part of this workforce. And we also committed to what we have launched also for mining sites, to the implementation of just transition agreements in the regions that were based on assessments, on the identification of projects, and provide the support lines in this under a participatory approach for accompany the transition at the region side. And that looks wants to look beyond the projects driven by utility companies, is looking for actual diversification and the best diversified economic scenarios at the end of the process. So I will show you some examples of what are the companies proposing in their support plans. As I said, they have to incorporate relocation plans for direct workers, and they can do it. They are companies that are already transitioning from coal to renewable energies. And for ancillary companies, for the subcontractors, they have to give them, these workers have to, they have to provide these workers with priority to the new immediate jobs through the restoration and the commissioning works, but also in new renewable energy projects that they could have in the same territory. They would have to include also how can they help the government to bring new investors beyond themselves to the territory, because they know the territory, they are big actors there, and also they have facilities in the territory that could be put at the service of new investments and new projects. And also they commit to include this worker in upskilling and reskilling programs. In the medium term, we ask them also to include in the support plans their own investments proposals. As I said, it could be on their own, the use of or the help to bring new investors in their installations, and also how they can help maybe municipalities to go beyond their economic present into long-term sustainability. We have to say that in these projects that the companies have submitted, some of them are ready to go. Some of them will need permits, concessions, support if they are, if we are talking about certain technologies, for example, or certain innovation projects. And we are also, or some of them will be submitted to the tendering processes that we are launching for network connections. This is a very innovative tool from the government side. Access to grid is a scarce resource in Spain, and we will tender that access to the grid to the best project in socio-economic and environmental results. So these companies are submitting plans that will be presented at these tendering processes. To give you a little bit about what we have only from these companies 58 projects presented. Many of them, of course, are renewable energy projects that could not be differently. Some are 7 renewable hydrogen for storage facilities for the renewable energy. Some of them bring also some industry-related, manufacturing industry, recycling, or logistic businesses. And that is very important in order to build this diversified context in the areas. And others, we have also other projects that go beyond that and focus on sustainable mobility or educational professional training or services of IT. So we have really like a wide variety of projects. And as you see, in terms of renewable energy, they propose close to 6 gigawatts of generation of renewable energy. I have to say that does not mean that all of these projects will come or will make a reality, but we have proposals, and you see the figures also for green hydrogen and battery storage. So, well, these utility companies have proposed a wide variety of projects, and sometimes very big projects, in order to change the coal installed capacity by renewable energy capacity. And how are we giving this from the government side? How are we giving this in a wider scope? We are working with these just transition agreements beyond the actors of this particular sectoral agreement with public administrations. We have signed protocols with regional governments and local authorities in order to have like a joint approach to these just transition agreements with companies, with you see business organizations, trade unions, university, educational centers, local action groups, environmental NGOs, a little bit of everything. And we are involving all of these actors in order to provide this sustainable economic context for those territories affected through diversification and also support of their indigenous capacities. We are also promoting energy transition projects beyond these actual companies. We want these territories that have been an important, a crucial part of our energy generation to be also able to be part of the future. So we are giving priority for just transition areas, projects in our renewable energy, hydrogen roadmap, storage, the storage strategy of the government of Spain, the innovative renewable energy support framework. All of these, of course, all of these support tools will follow a concurrency model, and projects from these companies will be presented to these different lines where we are opening. But what is very important is that we focus, or we put these just transition areas as priority areas for the most innovative part of our the energy system that we have to build in the coming years. We are supporting SMEs through grant lines, and we are supporting also social, environmental, and digital infrastructures in the territories in order to improve citizen services. It's very important, and retain population. In the Just Transition Agreements, we commit with every of these regions that at the end of the process, the closures will have a zero impact on employment and population. And that is very important. What are we going to do as the government? How much money are we going to put into that? Whatever it takes. Our commitment is really to, at the end of the process, have zero impacts on jobs and population. And as I told you before, from the government side, we are also trying to support these coal power plant workers, as also mining workers, giving them priority in the employment that is going to be created through the different measures of grant aids that we are putting into place. Some of these grants will come in the future from the Just Transition Fund, and we are working in our territorial plan, but some of them are coming today from national budgets, and we are also putting some thought of our recovery plan in this area. I would like to finalize with some comments that were made for the coal phase-out date in Spain. As you see, well, we are very much close to that. We only have 3 installations that we have to carefully evaluate when they will be out, because they are needed by the grid. They are needed for security grid purposes. We have, as it was said, overcapacity, but in these particular lines, these 3 installations are important for our grid stability. So we are carefully evaluating when this could be shut down, and we hope to have that information soon. Sometimes this will mean building backup infrastructure for the grid. It's something that, it cannot be made overnight. So we are really evaluating, and I thank you very much, Felicia, for your introduction. We will see if it's 23 or if it's 25. It will be as soon as the need of our grid can cope with that. And I will finalize here. Thank you very much for the opportunity.
Thank you, Laura, for this really very interesting presentation, and it's very nice to see your inclusive approach and how you've been bringing together all the concerned stakeholders from public authorities, the companies, the workers, representatives. I think this really gives it's a good example of how to go about it in a very inclusive manner. Now, we are still trying to reestablish connection with Barbara.
I'm here. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, now we can. So let's give it again a try, Barbara. Thank you for your efforts in reducing. We can resume from the slide where you had left, where you were going through the various elements also of your strategic approach. Thank you, Barbara.
Okay. I hope you can see the slide and how I'm going down. And sorry if you cannot see my camera and my face, but I'm here with you, so there might have been some technical problem. So on the right-hand side of the slide, you can see how the just transition plans in these 3 counties can contribute to coal phase out in Hungary. And these just transition plans of the 3 counties will be submitted to the European Commission as annexes of one of our operational programs, which is the Energy Efficiency Operation Program, EEOP, and these will be the 3 annexes of this operational program, and the Just Transition Fund will be priority axis number 5 of this operation program. And I think this is the most important slide because these are the key issues that we examine when we talk about coal phase out in general. So the first is the transition strategy. I think I can really say that based on the key stakeholders, which come from a wide range of institutions, government, industry, trade unions, regional and local authorities, regional actors, civic NGOs, we can really do a gradual phase out of the lignite capacities and mines. We have milestones, agreements, conditions to do that. And as I said, we need to mobilize complementary funds. The second big issue that I would like to focus on is the governance of the transition. The project partnership is huge. We have 22 project partners. As you can see, background institution, research institution of the ministry, the 2 NUTS 3-level government offices, 3 local municipalities, 1 central authority, 1 university, 8 enterprises, 2 trade unions, 2 county chambers of commerce and industry. And we also set up a coal commission, a huge coal commission, which has 6 working groups, including through the topics of coal phase out, employment, economy, environment, energy, poverty, and finance. Question number 3 is the technology options. We are working on prototypes to substitute lignite-fired capacities, let it be solar PVs or combination of solar PVs with energy storages. And also the disappearing rotating generators might also ask for the need of artificial inertia to be used to improve grid stability problems. And also we are concentrating on prototypes to substitute lignite burning in the residential sector, which together with individual building efficiency programs and energy community programs. Question number 4 is the repurposing of pre-existing mine sites, which includes environmental monitoring, but a very diverse set of ideas how we could repurpose these open cast mines for the use of agriculture, forestry, aquaculture, environmental education, recreation, water retention, or for spreading mining culture, because protection of mining cultural heritage is very important in this region. Me coming from a mining family, I know what it means to have open-air mining museums and still keeping the tradition of the old, more than 100-year-old mining choirs, for example, where I come from. Question number 5 is sustainable employment. It's very important that we segment the workforce based on age, health conditions, skills, experience, location, willingness to exchange career. And within this life integrated project, we are going to support career change for 500 workers and miners of the Matra power plant, preferably towards green economy. And last but not least, this is also a key target area of the Just Transition Fund is economic diversification. We also segment the supply chain companies into suppliers, buyers, clients of the lignite sector, and we're examining the number of employees, contracts, and so on. And we're going to support 250 companies among the 951 affiliated and supply chain companies of the single Matra power plant. So I'm talking about 1,000 companies which are connected to a power plant which is based on right now on lignite. So I think these numbers can tell a lot about what it means to talk about coal transition in a structured way. And we are going to find new clients and customers preferably in the green economy sector. And I was talking about, and this is the last but one slide in my presentation, the replication potential. I think the Hungarian project has a huge replication potential, especially in Eastern Europe's lignite region. I'm talking about those places where there's a huge surface coverage of open cast mines. So there are miners, and also a power plant built on local mining. So if you have a look at the map, you will see that the Hungarian coal region can have huge potential in replication in other areas where electricity production is based on lignite, where mining is significant in terms of asset operation cost, number of direct and indirect jobs, volume of production, and recultivation liabilities. We could really use this Hungarian project in those regions where coal lignite import is irrelevant because domestic production is dominant. And in Hungary, domestic production is dominant, and in many other mining sites in Eastern Europe. Of course, electricity is produced by vertically integrated companies, so that's very important that mines and power plants are together. So we are not importing coal, but we are mining it and using it in the power plant. And also there is also a residential lignite use that has to be tackled. And last but not least, this company pays a lot of industry tax to the local settlements. This industry tax, these municipalities in the region receive is like a breeding device for them to survive, to develop their villages, to develop their cities. Without this industry tax, these municipalities might have big disadvantage. So we really need to work on economic diversification to replace this missing industry tax income for the local municipalities in the future. And this is my last slide. As I told you, we are working on the Just Transition Fund of 3 counties. Heves and Borsod-Zemplén County are the 2 counties which are covered by this coal mining region in Hungary, and which covers the scope of the Matra power plant. And as you can see, we identified 6 main types of activities that could be and should be tackled, 40% of which focus on economy diversification and upskilling and reskilling. The first is investment in training and retaining of workforce. The second, green economic diversification, technological change, promotion of research, innovation hubs, and development of innovation. Number 3, encouraging the development of renewable energy infrastructure. Number 4, encourage environmentally friendly household energy production and energy usage. And I'm talking about local coal phase out from households, coal burning, lignite burning. And number 5 is green public transport development. And number 6 is the repurposing of the mining sites in Heves and Borsod-Zemplén mine. And as you can see, we identified the challenges posed by the transition in these 3 counties and the economic, social, and territory assessment of the transition to a climate neutral economy. And I'm talking about climate neutral economy because Hungary is one of those very few countries in the world which enshrine climate neutrality by 2050 in a law. Last June, the Hungarian parliament enshrined it in a law that Hungary wants to achieve climate neutrality on individual member state level by 2050. So, and this is also a very important pre-criteria in the Just Transition fund as well. So these are the activities: coal mining, coal-based electricity generation, manufacture of building materials, chemicals, heavy industry, and automotive industry that are the key challenges in Hungary's transition, especially in these 3 counties. And as you can see, we also divided that the fund could help maintain around 4,000 jobs in these 3 countries from the declining sectors, where the goal is really to keep jobs, and transforming sectors, where the goal is to support adaptation And as you can see, there are huge numbers here. And I really hope that together with the just transition plans of these two countries and the life integrated projects, which is focusing on the structured coal phase out of a really clearly defined coal region in Hungary, we can also help other member states to follow through. And we are more than happy to share our experiences, as this is also part of the life integrated project, to do so. So thank you so much for your kind attention. I'm really sorry for the technical problem, but I'm happy that you could hear me and that you could see the presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Barbara, for another very good example of an inclusive approach to the just transition. And I just hope that indeed also after this event, you will stay in touch between panel members, but also with those who are listening to us this morning, because there is so much examples from the ground that are worth sharing and exchanging further. Now, last but not least, and to give a slightly different perspective on how the transition is being implemented on the ground, we will hear from a coal region, Wielkopolska, which is clearly at the forefront of the transition in Poland, with bold and future-oriented ideas of what the future of energy and more region of the region will look like. Now, with us, Maciej Sytek, who is in charge of the restructuring of Eastern Wielkopolska and president of the board of regional development of the country of Konin. We look forward to your updates. The floor is yours, Maciej.
Thank you very much, Paula. I speak Polish, and okay. Okay. Dzień dobry Państwu. Niezmiernie miło mi jest wystąpić po raz kolejny na Platformie Powęglowej. Występowałem tutaj. You see the presentation?
We do.
Yes. Okay. Występowałem dokładnie 2 lata temu, w 2019 roku, i wtedy powiedziałem coś takiego w centrum Borszet, że za drugim prezydentem Stanów Zjednoczonych, Johnem Adamsem, że problem to okazja w przebraniu. I myślę, że Wielkopolska Wschodnia tak potraktowała ten problem, który mamy, to ogromne wyzwanie, które przed Wielkopolską stoi. I naszym celem było stworzenie kompleksowego programu podejścia do transformacji. Stworzyliśmy projekt, który nazywamy Wielkopolska Dolina Energii. I jest to projekt, którego głównym celem jest zadbanie o to, żeby transformacja odbyła się na wszystkich możliwych poziomach, żeby z jednej strony dać możliwość i dać pracę tym, którzy będą odchodzili z przemysłu paliwowo-energetycznego, a z drugiej strony zbudować nową tożsamość dla Wielkopolski Wschodniej, żeby dać ludziom nadzieję nie tylko jeżeli chodzi o statystyki i jeżeli chodzi o podejście do problemu, że jedno miejsce pracy zastąpimy nowym miejscem pracy, ale także zbudować pewną tożsamość i dumę z tego, że są w regionie, który przeżywa transformację. I naszym celem było określenie takich warunków, które pozwolą nam w sposób jasny i bardzo konkretny przejść do projektu. Dlatego też wyznaczyliśmy sobie, bym powiedział, bardzo ambitny cel. Chcemy osiągnąć neutralność klimatyczną w 2040 roku. To jest cel Wielkopolski Wschodniej. Wielkopolska Wschodnia to 5 powiatów, które mają kilkaset tysięcy mieszkańców. Od kilkudziesięciu lat funkcjonują w oparciu o wydobycie węgla brunatnego i jednocześnie spalanie tego węgla brunatnego w elektrowniach. Wydaje się, że cel jest bardzo, bardzo ambitny, natomiast to nie jest PR-owa zagrywka, to jest bardzo dokładnie przemyślany sposób, w jaki chcemy tą neutralność klimatyczną w 2040 roku osiągnąć. Do 2030 roku chcemy przede wszystkim zaprzestać eksploatacji węgla brunatnego i spalania go w energetyce i w ciepłownictwie. W związku z tym, że w zeszłym roku na jesieni grupa ZEPAK, która jest koncernem pracującym na terenie Wielkopolski Wschodniej, ogłosiła nową zieloną strategię odchodzenia od węgla, mamy bezpośrednią możliwość osiągnięcia celu do 2030 roku. W tym roku, w 2021 roku zostanie zamknięta jedna z odkrywek, kolejna odkrywka zostanie zamknięta w 2022 roku. Ostatnia odkrywka ma zostać zamknięta w 2030 roku, choć może to nastąpić wcześniej. To spowoduje, że do 2030 roku na terenie subregionu zmniejszymy emisję CO2 o 90-95%. W związku z tym jesteśmy jak gdyby patrząc na to, że możemy to osiągnąć do 2030 roku, podjęliśmy takie wyzwanie, które ma spowodować, że te pozostałe 10 lub 5%, które emisyjności w transporcie, w pozostałym przemyśle, w budownictwie, będziemy starali się przez następne 10 lat osiągnąć tak, żeby neutralność klimatyczna w Wielkopolsce Wschodniej w 2040 roku stała się faktem. To także spowoduje, że w całej Wielkopolsce dzięki tym działaniom zmniejszymy emisję o około 70%. Nasze działania są skierowane przede wszystkim na bardzo konkretne rezultaty. My od 2 lat działamy jako Agencja Rozwoju Regionalnego i Województwo Wielkopolskie w kierunku jasnego określenia, w jaki sposób chcemy się rozwijać. Wyznaczyliśmy sobie 3 inteligentne specjalizacje. To jest z jednej strony odnawialne źródła energii, czyli inwestycje w słońce i wiatr spowodują, że dzięki powstaniu farm fotowoltaicznych na terenach pogórniczych uda nam się przede wszystkim doprowadzić do tego, że region nie straci charakteru energetycznego. I z drugiej strony dzięki temu zapewni dochody dla samorządów. Drugim taką inteligentną specjalizacją, którą sobie wyznaczyliśmy, to jest elektromobilność, czyli pozyskiwanie inwestorów, którzy będą chcieli tworzyć różnego rodzaju przedsięwzięcia związane między innymi z elektromobilnością, czy na przykład fabryki baterii, czy różnych części do tych baterii. I trzecim elementem, który wyznaczyliśmy sobie jako główny cel, to są technologie wodorowe. Każdy z tych celów, każdy z tych inteligentnych specjalizacji właściwie w tej chwili dzieje się na bieżąco. To znaczy są bardzo konkretne rezultaty tych działań. Pozyskaliśmy inwestora, który w Koninie buduje już fabrykę i za 1,5 roku powstanie. Firma Johnson Matthey buduje fabrykę, która będzie produkowała pewne elementy do baterii, akumulatorów. Zatrudni 600 osób. Grupa ZEPAK w tej chwili buduje farmę fotowoltaiczną, która będzie miała na 70 hektarów, ale jednocześnie w planach ZEPAK-u, a właściwie już dziejących się, jest zakup elektrolizera i produkcja wodoru. W ciągu kilku najbliższych miesięcy uda się otworzyć stację wodorową w Koninie. To będzie pierwsza w Polsce stacja wodorowa w Koninie. Wodór ma się stać dla regionu taką przewagą konkurencyjną. Chcemy tworzyć nowoczesny region, który będzie wyróżniał się pewnymi elementami, ale także w planach ZEPAK-u, i tutaj będziemy ich mocno wspierali, jest produkcja autobusu wodorowego, która zostanie prawdopodobnie, o to zabiegamy, żeby została zlokalizowana na terenie Wielkopolski Wschodniej. Te wszystkie działania, które prowadzimy, z jednej strony prowadzimy działania związane właśnie ze wsparciem różnego rodzaju przedsięwzięć zapewniających nam możliwość tworzenia nowych miejsc pracy, ale także chcemy przede wszystkim wspierać górników, którzy będą odchodzili z odkrywek. I tutaj uruchomiliśmy już kilka projektów. Jednym z takich projektów jest projekt dotyczący przekwalifikowania. Przeznaczyliśmy na niego ponad 20 milionów złotych. Z drugiej strony prowadzimy także bardzo szeroki projekt internacjonalizacji i rozpoznawalności marki Wielkopolskiej Dolinie Energii. Zapraszamy wszystkich, którzy chcą funkcjonować na terenie albo chcą inwestować na naszym terenie. Te cele, które jak gdyby sobie wyznaczyliśmy 2 lata temu i które w poszczególnych latach realizujemy także poprzez dokumenty, które postanowiliśmy wytworzyć. Pierwszym i takim podstawowym dokumentem, który udało nam się stworzyć, jest koncepcja transformacji Wielkopolski Wschodniej. I ta koncepcja to jest bardzo szeroki dokument, który ma zapewnić przede wszystkim bardzo różnorodną integrację funduszy. Z jednej strony to, co powiedział pan premier Buzek, jest tak, że Fundusz Sprawiedliwej Transformacji jest jednym z narzędzi, którymi będziemy się posługiwali, ale z drugiej strony mamy pełną świadomość tego, że Fundusz Sprawiedliwej Transformacji nie jest remedium na wszystko. Ma oczywiście swoje cele, jest środkami, którym będziemy chcieli wykorzystać, ale musimy sięgnąć po bardzo różnorodne środki, od programów regionalnych, programów krajowych. Niedawno złożyliśmy wniosek do programu LIFE, chcąc pozyskać pieniądze na właśnie wsparcie Wielkopolski Wschodniej, jeżeli chodzi o osiągnięcie neutralności klimatycznej. Mamy tutaj nadzieję, że uda nam się to osiągnąć. I oczywiście koncepcja sprawiedliwej transformacji Wielkopolski Wschodniej jest bardzo szerokim dokumentem, dosyć obszernym. Z tego dokumentu wyłonił się nasz plan sprawiedliwej transformacji, który w tej chwili jest w konsultacjach społecznych. Przekazaliśmy go do ministerstwa i pracujemy jeszcze nad nim. Mamy nadzieję, że do końca maja ten dokument będzie zaakceptowany i stanie się podstawą do tego, żeby sięgnąć po środki i je uruchomić i starać się osiągnąć te cele, które sobie jasno wyznaczyliśmy. 2030 odejście od węgla w energetyce i ciepłownictwie, 2040 neutralność klimatyczna i tutaj jesteśmy przekonani, że te nasze działania osiągną swój cel. Oczywiście plan transformacji jest dokumentem, który znajduje się na naszej stronie. To, co jest jak gdyby naszym takim głównym doświadczeniem, jeżeli chodzi o Wielkopolskę, to, że najważniejszym elementem planowania czegokolwiek jest współpraca ze wszystkimi interesariuszami. Postanowiliśmy bardzo otwarcie funkcjonować, jeżeli chodzi o udział, czy to w planowaniu, czy w koncepcji, czy to planowaniu, jeżeli chodzi o plan transformacji. Zaprosiliśmy z jednej strony związki zawodowe, zaprosiliśmy NGO-sy, zaprosiliśmy wszystkich, którzy chcą brać w tym udział i właściwie przez cały 2020 rok pracujemy wspólnie i staramy się jak najbardziej transparentnie to prowadzić. Nasze doświadczenie mówi, że wszystkie plany, wszystkie nasze działania, które dzięki tym konsultacjom powodują, że te plany stają się lepsze, że różnego rodzaju punkty widzenia pozwalają nam na to, żeby osiągnąć lepsze rezultaty i żeby dotrzeć do społeczeństwa. to, co uważamy za jeden z najważniejszych elementów, to to, żeby wesprzeć wszystkich, przede wszystkim ludzi, którzy w tej transformacji funkcjonują. Proszę Państwa, z punktu widzenia krajowego, czasami nawet w Brukseli, to jest statystyka, czyli 6 000 ludzi to jest jakaś statystyka, którą się widzi z zupełnie innego poziomu. Natomiast w naszym przypadku, jeżeli patrzymy z punktu widzenia regionu, to każdy człowiek, który traci pracę, to jest dramat tej osoby i musimy doprowadzić do takiej sytuacji, żeby ich wesprzeć. To, co w tej chwili spędza nam sens pobieg, to to, że Fundusz Sprawiedliwej Transformacji tak naprawdę i programy zostaną uruchomione w 2022 roku, a my już dzisiaj mamy część osób, które prawdopodobnie pod koniec roku straci pracę i musimy budować narzędzia także ze starej perspektywy, pewnego rodzaju bypass, który wesprze tych, którzy być może już stracą pracę. Wielkopolska Wschodnia będzie prowadziła działania bardzo zintegrowane w taki sposób, żeby osiągnąć swoje cele, które sobie wyznaczyliśmy. Oczywiście jest tak, że dzięki Funduszowi Sprawiedliwej Transformacji jesteśmy w stanie część tych celów osiągnąć w dużo krótszym czasie i tutaj wielkie podziękowanie dla inicjatywy pana premiera Buzka i pozostałych, którzy stworzyli Platformę Powęglową. Platforma Powęglowa stała się jedną z najbardziej inspirujących instytucji przez ostatnie 3 lata, przynajmniej w moim życiu, ale myślę także mojego zespołu, i dała nam możliwość stworzenia zupełnie nowej jakości i tworzenia jak gdyby zupełnie nowego planu. To, co jest najważniejsze i to, co uważamy, że jest ważne, to nie powinniśmy popełniać błędów, które zostały popełnione w latach 90. Dziś tworzymy zupełnie nową jakość i sprawiedliwa transformacja może stać się wielkim kołem zamachowym nie tylko w kwestii energetyki, ale całego przemysłu. Moim zdaniem przeżywamy w tej chwili rewolucję energetyczną na miarę tej z XIX wieku i być może dzięki temu, że staramy się od razu jak gdyby osiągać cele bez tego okresu przejściowego, będzie to przewaga konkurencyjna dla naszego regionu. Chciałbym bardzo podziękować za zaproszenie na na dzisiejsze spotkanie i jednocześnie zaprosić do współpracy wszystkich, którzy chcą z Wielkopolską Wschodnią współpracować. Dziękuję bardzo i mam nadzieję, że ten problem, który jest okazją w wydaniu Wielkopolski Wschodniej zostanie osiągnięty i my w 2040 roku będziemy cieszyli się neutralnością klimatyczną. Tego i sobie, i Państwu życzę. Dziękuję bardzo.
Thank you, Maciej, very much for this presentation directly from and on the region of Wielkopolska. Hope that the interpretation has worked for everybody. And now I'm very pleased to go on to the question and answer session and to give the floor for the moderation to Adela Tesarowa. Adela has been recently appointed head of unit in the Directorate-General for Energy. She is responsible for consumers, local initiatives, and of course, just transition. So this is an opportunity to really also present you, Adela, because she will be for sure now a new reference name for you in this area. I will leave you in these excellent hands of Adela, and thank you very much. As far as I am concerned, I learned a lot, and I really hope that you will be in touch, exchanging the excellent practice that has been presented here today, because there's a lot more going on. Thank you for your participation. Adela, thank you for being there, and now to you.
Thank you very much, Paula, and thank you very much to all our speakers. So in the Q&A session, I will now, we have collected some questions from the audience and also from our side. And so if it's okay for you, I will now ask a few questions to our panelists. And maybe I would start with Felicia, who was the first speaker. And I have a question on the modeling that you presented in your presentation, where you have showed a faster coal phase out in Europe than maybe what we normally have in our models. So I would like to ask a question: what investments do you think are needed to allow such a quick phase out to happen, and what potentially you see as a role for natural gas? Thank you.
Thank you for this question. So yes, our models are built on least cost optimization, which for each year adopts the cost optimal power mix, which means that the model can close inefficient capacity and instead build new, more economically viable capacity. So there will definitely be needed a lot of investment to achieve these scenarios. Unfortunately, I don't have the exact investment numbers in front of me right now, but I'm happy to take questions on that later on over email. But yes, as you could see in the scenarios I presented on, for example, Poland, there would be a need for investments in around 20 gigawatts of new onshore wind in this scenario. This is, of course, quite unlikely with the current policy on minimum distance rules in Poland. So yes, this is a economically optimal scenario, but not necessarily reflective of the investment landscape we see in reality.
Okay. Do you want to say something specifically on the role of gas?
Yes, of course. So yeah, I touched on gas quite a bit in my presentation, and as I mentioned, we do expect a role for gas, but because of the zero marginal cost nature of renewables, we expect that gas plants will not be generating whenever there is enough solar and wind generation. So this means that anyone investing in new gas plants need to take into account that the running hours will not be that of the base load capacity we currently see for coal and also some gas plants, and instead the financial viability of gas will be depending on being able to capture those very high price spikes that can occur when there is no renewables or very low renewables generation. Some countries have also introduced capacity markets, and these might, of course, also play a role in making investments in gas plants viable. But although gas is needed for a stable electricity system, it is also clear that we don't need a one-to-one replacement of coal plants with gas plants. So the overall thermal capacity in most European countries, it has already been shrinking, or it will probably shrink in the future, because renewables can pick up a lot of the generation, and especially with increased interconnection, there will be more likelihood that the sun is shining somewhere and the wind is blowing somewhere.
Thank you very much. I have now a question to Barbara, but I see Barbara is on the phone because it's a bit related question. So maybe I ask the next question about the politics of coal phase out, and maybe Maciej could answer this question. How do you see and then we'll come to Barbara next. Yeah, I see Barbara is again with us, so I'll come back to you next. So Maciej, could you maybe answer this question? The transition from coal is, of course, politically a very difficult, and it depends on the political willingness. Do you have, from your experience in your region, could you maybe comment on this? Thank you.
Pytanie oczywiście jest strasznie trudne. Jeżeli rząd jakby zdecydował się jeszcze na temat wyjścia od węgla. Natomiast wydaje w naszym przypadku, że jest to kwestia decyzji. My mamy o tyle łatwiej, jeżeli chodzi o Wielkopolskę Wschodnią, że mamy prywatnego inwestora, który podjął jasne działanie. Dziś decyzja o odejściu od węgla nie jest decyzją tylko i wyłącznie polityczną. Moim zdaniem staje się jak najbardziej decyzją ekonomiczną, ze względu chociażby na to, że spalanie węgla jest strasznie drogie. Ze względu na przykład na ceny świadectw i dzisiaj już 46 euro musimy dopłacać do tego. W związku z tym w Polsce ja obserwuję w ciągu ostatnich 3 lat bardzo silne jak gdyby przejście i zrozumienie problemu. Ten problem jest oczywiście przez różne regiony rozumiany w inny sposób. My mamy łatwiej, dlatego że u nas z jednej strony kończą się zasoby węgla, z drugiej strony decyzja właściciela powoduje, że będziemy odchodzili i prawdopodobnie nastąpi to szybciej niż w 2030 roku. I tutaj te działania są istotne, ale dostrzegam także na przykład w Bełchatowie, na Śląsku oczywiście, czy w innych regionach, że ten proces mocno przyspieszył, że wszyscy zaczęli rozumieć, że węgiel jest ślepą uliczką. I że Komisja Europejska właśnie na to przeznaczyła bardzo duże środki, żebyśmy mogli z tego skorzystać. I wydaje mi się, ja przynajmniej uważam, że odejście od węgla to jest także wyzwanie dla Polski nie tylko ze względu na grupę osób zatrudnionych w górnictwie, ale także na to, że w Europie świadomi konsumenci bardzo niechętnie patrzą na producentów, którzy stosują brudną energię. I to może być główne wyzwanie, czyli to, że jeżeli Polska bardzo dużo swojej produkcji przeznacza na eksport na przykład do krajów Europy Zachodniej, to konsumenci z Europy Zachodniej mogą nas zmusić do tego, żebyśmy stosowali czystą energię. Ta świadomość jest coraz większa. Uważam, że 2035 rok to będzie koniec węgla w Polsce. I ta świadomość jest coraz większa, a myślę, że my jako Wielkopolska wspólnie z Dolnym Śląskiem i mimo wszystko ze Śląskiem uświadomiliśmy to, że ta droga jest właściwa, że odchodzenie od węgla jest czymś, co jest dla nas dobre i może w perspektywie spowodować przewagę konkurencyjną, jeżeli dobrze ten czas wykorzystamy i wykorzystamy Fundusz Sprawiedliwej Transformacji.
Okay, thank you very much. We have 7 minutes left, and I think this question actually applies to all our distinguished speakers. So I would maybe now follow with Barbara, who is with us again. So on the politics of coal phase out, and maybe if you could also comment on the how you deal with the employment fallout in the case of the Matra power plant, as was raised in the question, in particular for you. And then the same question on coal phase out and the politics of it to our other 2 speakers, Blaž and Laura. Thank you.
Thank you so much for the question. As I told you, the structured coal phase out will be facilitated by the Life Integrated project. And in the framework of this 9-year-long project, we also intend to reskill and upskill 500 workers that are seriously affected by coal phase out in the long run. So this is the question, the written question that I can see. And sorry, there was a cut in the network. So can you repeat your first question on the coal phase out and the policy?
On the politics of it, that of course the coal phase out, it's about politics and the willingness of politicians to of course commit to it. So if you could, from the experience of Hungary, also comment more on the political side of the coal phase out. Thank you.
I think the political side is right there to assist the structured coal phase out. As I told you, Hungary enshrined 2050 climate neutrality in law. And also, if you read the Hungarian National Energy and Climate Plan of Hungary, the coal phase out date is clearly set by 2030, which is a clear engagement for it to happen. So politically, I think the whole government is there. And also last February, an 8-point action plan was approved by the Hungarian government. And one of these 8 points is the transition, the energy transition. So in the short term and in the long term, the Hungarian government is really dedicated to follow through these steps. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Could I maybe ask Laura or Blaž if they are still with us, as I don't see them on the video, if they would like to comment on this question?
Right here. I don't know if you, I think my camera is...
Yes, you are back. Yes.
So thank you very much, Adela. I think maybe we always put like the big emphasis in political willnesses and phasing out coal. And I think it has to be put in both sides, in phasing out coal, but also to make this a just transition. I mean, we need political willnesses for both parts of the same coin. And what is true that for instance, in our government, we feel that political willnesses sometimes solving a problem goes beyond your political willnesses. You have to build trust with people, and that is sometimes a very difficult work to do, because these regions, these coal regions in Europe had already suffered a long reconversion. I mean, people have already know on their own what happened before. So you have sometimes even to rebuild trust. And it's not only your political willnesses, it's your political capital. How people give you that political and I have to tell you that in our experience, that is something that you have to win every day, and that sometimes, because reconversions are not easy, sometimes you win and sometimes you lose the trust, and you have to rebuild it with new measures or with new approaches. So I think it goes really beyond political willnesses. That is very important, is key, but we need the willingness of of more actors that are ready to make that change. And change sometimes drives fear among people. So you have really to put a lot of attention in rebuilding the trust and maintaining the trust in order to continue with your political willnesses that otherwise will be democratically, for instance, confronted. So I think it is a part of the solution, and it has to build collectively.
Thank you very much. And last speaker, Blaž from Slovenia, the Secretary of State. Are you still with us? Would you like to comment?
I believe that Mr. Košorok lost his connection.
Okay. So I think we conclude here. I thank you very much for your time and for availability to join us this morning to open the current edition of the Just Transition Week and the Coal Regions in Transition Week. And we hope that also all participants enjoyed this morning session, and that they will join us on the other events that we have throughout this week, technical and more technical events on different topics. And I hope you will enjoy this Just Transition Week. Thank you very much to all our speakers and to everybody who has followed us online for this event.
Thank you so much. Goodbye.
Thank you, everyone.
Bye-bye. Bye-bye.